14th, 2021 morning session of the Portland City Council. Good morning, Megan. Please call the roll.
Morning, Mayor. Hardesty. Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and State Law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and Channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to the council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, your understanding. You're becoming experts at Zoom technology as we manage through this challenging situation to conduct the city's business. And with that, we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that council meetings are recorded. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So first up, Megan, is communications. That would be item 621.
Request of Tina Barrows to address council regarding worsening climate conditions and the need to act with urgency.
Good morning.
Okay, hello City Council. Thank you for having me today and giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm pretty nervous. However, I'm way more scared about the current and predicted outlook on our climate, on our food production system, and our biodiversity. So here I am. My name is Tina Barrows. I guess I forgot in my panic. And yeah, the latest IPCC report just got released last week, and it states that we're at code red to address the climate crisis. It's official that our climate has begun to collapse, which poses a real threat to human life. Emergency action is not something to be put on the to-do list for the future. I'm afraid for my own life, and I'm terrified that my friends and family will suffer too. In times of war, governments do not hesitate to implement immediate and drastic measures to respond to the crisis at hand. You must do the same now. Multiple organizations have already petitioned you to address this crisis with no sufficient action on your part so far. I understand that your job is hard, and I am sorry if we're creating extra hardship. So today, I'm calling in on behalf of the Extinction Rebellion activists who are delivering yet another petition to City Hall as we speak. We hope that it won't be forgotten in a drawer in somebody's office. I would like to finish up by reading this petition. And I'm not sure, can I have camera access to show what's going on outside?
Yep, you have the ability to turn on your camera yourself now.
Oh, cool, thank you. Alrighty, here we go. So, dear Portland City Council, it has been a year since Portland declared a climate emergency. What part of climate emergency don't you understand? If we don't take radical action immediately, life and human civilization as we know it is facing utter annihilation. You need to rewrite the rules and remake the system, as you have not yet adequately acted upon various demands from your constituents. We lovingly gift you our boat, the Maria Enriqueta Matute, as a reminder that you must act now. Change Portland's climate target to net zero emissions by 2025. Immediately create a citizens' assembly to guide you, and deny Zenith all permits and approvals. Sincerely, your friends at Extinction Rebellion. And that concludes what I have to say. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. And I did see the folks outside when I rode my bike by this morning. Thank you for being here today and holding us accountable. And please be careful. I also note that people are standing out in the road, so I just encourage people to keep their eyes open. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next individual, please, Megan.
Item 622, request of Sharon Nassett to address council regarding the condition of Portland and the recall of Mayor Wheeler.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Sharon Nassett. Thank you very much for letting me address council this morning. I would like to say that we've already had an election recently, and that is a recall. And so right now, our focus needs to be on pitching in and doing anything that we can that we feel is good. And everything is connected. So anytime you see things that you don't feel are quite right, turn around and think of something you can do, even if it's small, to those around you to get it accomplished. I am saying that we have three of the problems right now from the policies of Mayor Katz, and we need to readdress them. One is making areas in our town urban renewal or urban removal, not noticing that those spaces were not empty. Second one is pack it in and pack it out policy when it came to trash in our parks and the removal of trash cans from our parks and the street corners, busy street corners in our neighborhoods to save money. And the closing of bathrooms as seasonal. I grew up here as a child, and I don't mean to sound like I'm shouting, grew up here as a child, and even as a teenager, 24 hours a day, you could go into a bathroom. Our bathrooms, so Mayor Katz made them seasonal, closing several of them, as well as not monitoring the public ones downtown that had closed, such as Pioneer Courthouse Square old ones underground, Forecourt Fountains, Newberry's, Greyhound Bus Depot, the Galleria, Herfy's, Hamburger Mary's, Metro, the Virginia Cafe, IHOP, and Burger King, which were all within a block or two of each other. And then there were several others. She also closed several of the bathhouses. Some of them were rather nice. You could go and pay and sit in a hot tub and they were nice. The best bathrooms we have had are the ones across the street that you currently have from your building or up at the Rose Gardens. They're concrete. They're open all year round. There aren't any doors. You can hear inside. You can look at the stalls and see if anybody is there. They need to be upgraded with showers. You have those at parks. And when I was a child, you had them in all kinds of places. A fundraiser would be best to all of a sudden go, oh, okay, in 1960s, 70s, people were not having a problem in using the bathrooms outside. So what was the number ratio for people? And then do the math. have a large fundraiser. Get Coin TV, get all of the stations, Channel 12, have them raise some funds. And it was the most heartening thing you ever did see when you watched them break the concrete that held the trash cans, because people kept putting trash in them. And when you're on busy streets, you will notice just a little square piece of concrete sitting in odd spots. Those used to have trash cans. So good luck. You've all won your elections. Get in there, do some good. But the bathrooms, the trash, the shower houses and stuff, you know, the urban renewal, wrong direction. Pearl District was not an empty space. The nooks, the crannies, the small businesses and stuff, continuing to do those type of urban renewals in other areas only takes the taxes from our school, our fire, our police, and has raising a pint of beer from $5 to $10, made us the second in the nation for highest housing, wrong direction, and lowest wage jobs. Events people come here because they love us. We don't need event areas, and certainly not from our tax dollars. So thank you again.
Sharon, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. You've given us a couple of great ideas, and I know the Parks Commissioner is listening intently as well. So thank you. Megan, next individual, please. I believe it's 623.
Request of Andrea Logren to address council regarding moving self-defense classes away from the Portland Police Bureau and into Portland Parks and Recreation.
Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry, a moment there to get my video going. So my name's Andrea Logren, and I am representing the Women's Strength Self-Defense Program that's currently run through the Portland City Police Bureau. And I am addressing you to ask for your assistance in moving the program from the police department to Parks and Recreation. So just a little bit of history. This program was founded in the 1970s as a crime prevention program through some federal grant funding and sort of leadership by some people who had this idea of training women to sort of prevent rape from happening. As you can imagine, a lot of development of ideas has happened since 1978. And so we really have a different framework for how we teach self-defense and the importance it has for the community. So one of the things that has been a limitation for the program for quite a number of years is that its association with the police leads people to assume that the people who are the instructors in the program are police officers, and that isn't true. They're volunteers. They're people like me. I've been volunteering with this program for 6 years. I believe many of the people in there have been there for a long time. When people show up at our class, they're surprised that we're not police officers. So one of the things that happens is that anybody who would be afraid of taking a class with a police officer doesn't come to the class. So what kinds of groups are we talking about here? We're talking about sex workers. We're talking about houseless people. We're talking about a lot of people of color, people who are disabled, people who are undocumented, people with disabilities. And so what we end up with is a program that doesn't adequately address the needs of the most vulnerable people in our community. And I wish that that wasn't the case. I wish that these people were not afraid of an association with the police department, but that isn't something that we can fix very quickly. I think there's a long history of fear within those communities, in part because some of those people, like in the case of sex workers, right, are engaging in something that might be considered by some folks as a crime. So we believe that by moving the program away from the police department and into Parks and Recreation will better serve the needs of the community. I presented a petition to Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Rubio with the signatures of the current volunteers, and we're asking for your support because we've tried to go through this process within the police department itself and have gotten nowhere. And that's been actually happening for quite a number of years, I think at least 10 years. So we're looking for a leadership approach. Thank you for letting me address the council today.
Thank you. Hey, Andrea, first of all, thank you for bringing that before the council. And I will pledge to work with Commissioner Rubio on this question in our upcoming next budget cycle. And just to put a little context on this, in all fairness, the Police Bureau was struggling with where to put this program as well. This was very much a conversation within PPB and whether or not they should be the fiscal and organizational sponsors of this, or whether it should be done by an outside organization or a different bureau within the city. So I want you to know they're not completely oblivious to the concerns that you raised. And in fact, I would go so far as to say there was probably some concern on the part of some in the Police Bureau when we funded it through the Police Bureau. I want to thank you for being an instructor. I think it's a really solid program, and that's what we heard from the community is they like the program and they want to see the program continue to exist. But I'd love to work alongside you and the commissioner in charge and others to see if there isn't a way to strengthen our programs, strengthen our strength programs, and do right by the community. So thank you for being here today. And I see Commissioner Rubio has her hand raised as well. Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Andrea. I just want to thank you for your advocacy, and you've brought this to our attention in our office. And I know we now have scheduled time to talk, and just so that you know, we've connected to Parks, and we're open to looking at this issue with you. So we look forward to the conversation.
Yeah. I appreciate both of you and your response. This is something that I think will not be a difficult change, and I think might suit everybody, including the Police Bureau, which I do know they're not super enthusiastic about it being a good fit for them. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for being here today. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Next individual, please, Megan, 624.
Request of Richard Rubin to address council regarding an issue related to a tiny home community.
Hi, Richard.
And Mayor Richard has canceled their request for communication.
Okay, very good. Then let's jump right into time certain item. Well, actually, let's do the consent agenda. Have any items been pulled off of the consent agenda?
We've received no requests.
Please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the consent agenda is adopted. Let's go to the first time certain item, number 625 times certain 945.
Consider proposal of 340 Northwest Gleason for demolition review and adjustment review approval. And Bureau of Development staff.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll continue.
Sorry.
No problem. And Bureau of Development staff recommendation for denial for a contributing building, the Old Blanchet House at 340 Northwest Gleason Street in the new Chinatown, Japantown National Register Historic District, LU 21-029602 DMAD.
Sorry, Megan. I thought that was the end of the sentence. You were just taking a breath because it's such a long sentence. So thank you for that. So Commissioner Ryan, this is a final vote, I believe. I'll turn this over to you.
I think we turn it over to Lindley, correct?
Very good. Lindley,
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. So at this point, the findings have been submitted to council, and all that's left is for council to make a motion. I believe the appropriate motion would be something to the effect of, I move that council approve demolition and adjustment and adopt the findings.
Colleagues, I move that the council approve the demolition and adjustment and adopt the findings. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Ryan seconds. Any further discussion? Megan, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The demolition is approved. The findings are adopted. We can't quite go to the second time certain item. It's a little early. Let's go please to item 638 on the regular agenda.
Appoint Derek Trost to the Noise Review Board for term to expire September 1st, 2024.
Karen Couch, Noise Office Coordinator in the Office of Community and Civic Life, is with us today. Welcome, Catherine. How are you today?
I am fine. Hello, Mayor, Commissioners. I am, as you just heard, the program coordinator for the noise program at Community and Civic Life. We're really excited about this candidate. Derek Trost this is the second time he's been interviewed by a panel. The first time he narrowly didn't get in for the acoustic specialist, but he's really a wonderful candidate. He's an architectural and acoustic designer with a professional degree in architecture. He specializes in recording studios and live performance venues. He's also an active professional musician, performing both live and in the studio, which is really great because there's a lot of music in Portland, and to have somebody on the board that understands it is just exciting. His term will end September 2024, and that's my wrap up, I guess.
Very good. Thank you, Catherine. Is Derek with us today?
I don't believe he is.
Very good. Colleagues, any comments? If none, I'll entertain a motion. This is a report.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Ryan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Rubio. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll, Megan.
Maps,
I'd like to thank Derek for his service to our community. I vote aye.
Rubio,
Again, want to also congratulate Derek on his service to the city. I vote aye.
Ryan,
Thank you, Catherine. That was really thorough. And thank you, Derek, for your service. Great to have a musician on the noise board. Aye.
Wheeler,
I want to thank you, Catherine, this great appointment. Derek, thank you for sticking with us, and your perseverance is appreciated. You are an outstanding candidate, and the fact that you're expressing a willingness to take the time and the energy to be part of this important noise review board speaks volumes about your commitment to the community, and I really appreciate it. So I'm more than thrilled that you're stepping forward. I vote aye. The report is accepted. The appointment's approved. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, have a nice morning. Bye.
You too. Thanks a lot. We're still not able to go to time certain, the second time certain item. Let's do 639, please, on the regular agenda. This isn't a non-emergency ordinance. I'm sorry, second reading. Go ahead and read it. It's the second reading.
authorize bid solicitation and contracting with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder for the procurement of waterworks supplies at an estimated cost of $20 million.
Commissioner Maps, I understand you may have an amendment.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, I have a small amendment to this ordinance. I believe that all the commissioners' offices, the city attorney, and the council clerk have copies of that amendment. Briefly, this amendment removes the low bid requirement and adds ordinance language that has been generalized and provides the Bureau with flexibility to include corporate responsibility as one of the evaluation criteria in the solicitation. Should my colleagues not have any further questions, I motion to amend the ordinance as written.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from Commissioner Maps on an amendment. We have a second from Commissioner Ryan. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Megan, please call the roll on the amendment.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Lindley, I have a question for you. I should probably also ask for public testimony since the amendment's substantive. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So it's a little awkward to do testimony after the amendment, but my guess is this isn't too much of a hot button issue. Megan, has anybody signed up to testify on the amendment?
No, no one has signed up.
Very good. So now that this has been amended, it will move to a second reading as amended. Is that correct, Lindley?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, if I may, if my colleagues have no objection, I'd like to move to make this an emergency ordinance so that we could start on this work right away.
I'll second that. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, call the roll on.
Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but we need, Commissioner Maps, could you please state a reason for the emergency to including the emergency clause?
Sure. So I'd like to add an emergency clause so that no further time is lapsed in the execution of this contract necessary to secure the essential materials necessary to maintain the city's water works infrastructure.
That's as compelling as I've ever heard. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll on the amendment to add the emergency clause.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye, the amendment's adopted. To the main motion as twice amended, please call the roll.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted as amended, and Lindley, thank you for your guidance on that. I appreciate it. Next up, we can get to we can go back to the second time certain item. That would be item number 626, please.
Accept the 2020 annual report of the Portland Police Bureau.
Colleagues, under the DOJ settlement agreement, the Police Bureau presents an annual report to the council. The Portland Police Bureau will also present this report at all precincts, along with educating the community on certain rights they have when encountering the police. As we all know, we faced serious challenges in 2020, both nationally as well as in our city. PPB was at the forefront of many of those challenges. This report is PPB's summary of the issues they faced on behalf of our city. As a city, we need to overcome those challenges. We need to make Portland a place where all community members know that the police are there to protect and serve each and every one of them. The city is committed to police reform, and I look forward to hearing the chief's report for 2020. Consistent with our practice, we do not take oral testimony on reports. I want to acknowledge and appreciate the written testimony that was received by Dan Handelman on this report. Thank you, Dan. Chief Lavelle is with us today to present the report. Welcome, Chief Lavelle.
Hello, Mayor, Council. Glad to be with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2020 and our annual report from 2020. So good morning, I'm Chief Chuck Lavelle. I'm happy to be here today with everyone to present Portland Police Bureau's 2020 annual report. As you all know, last year was a year unlike any other. At the Police Bureau, we had 5 factors that really impacted us. The COVID-19 pandemic, 171 nights of crowd management events, budget cuts, heightened tensions between political factions during an election year, and our critical staffing shortage. A few accomplishments I want to recognize. Early on, we were really concerned that if a high number of our employees contracted COVID-19, we'd be challenged to respond to 911 calls. I'm really proud of the work we did to address this. We immediately implemented an incident command team who worked with health officials to develop new protocols and obtain appropriate protective gear. We had to transition a number of employees to remote working conditions during the pandemic, and our IT folks really assisted in making this successful. In regard to our work in equity, we revised the 5-year racial equity plan. We also created the equity training specialist position. We continue to expand our open data portal, adding an overtime and shootings dashboard. We started training to implement the active bystandership for law enforcement intervention training, known as ABLE. Wellness is really a concern for ensuring our employees have good mental, emotional, and physical health. We expanded our internal website, formed a new wellness committee, and conducted a restoration project designed to help our employees. I implemented an Office of Community Engagement that was comprised of a bilingual and diverse group of personnel. They participated in our advisory councils, partnered with Sunshine to distribute more than 5,000 food boxes, and attended as many community events as they could during the pandemic. They also responded to meeting requests from the Office of Youth Violence Prevention and trying to mitigate gun violence. Unfortunately, by the beginning of this year, we couldn't sustain it due to our staffing, so the officers had to return to the precincts. I am proud of the community policing work they did in 2020. 2 new councils were created in 2020. The community-led Latino Advisory Council was formed, and the Bureau created the Equity Advisory Council. Lastly, we looked for ways to communicate to more communities, especially in terms of public safety and COVID messaging. And we expanded our use of safe harbor languages. I'm just going to focus on 3 challenges summarized in the report: crowd control, staffing, and crime. Last year's crowd control events impacted our trust and legitimacy with the community, as well as took our patrol officers away from answering 911 calls, thereby affecting our response time to people calling for emergency help. As you know, Portland was on a national stage. We had a lot of people live streaming these events on social media channels. We had the president tweeting about it, a national news media focused on Portland. There were mistakes made during our response. There were some things we did not do well and that we need to change. As a Bureau, we misinterpreted what constitutes active aggression versus passive resistance. At times, we cited the conduct of the crowd to justify actions taken against individuals. We can and must do better. Our job as leaders is to ensure our employees have the proper tools, training, and resources to do what we ask them to do. Last year, the shifting landscape created an environment where we had to remain fluid. We needed to frequently adjust our decision-making around deployment of crowd control munitions and other force in crowd environments. Sometimes there was confusion, miscommunication, or not enough communication. Last year impacted our employees greatly. Our rapid response team eventually resigned this year, and we had more officers resign than in any time in modern history. Many officers were injured, threatened, and doxxed, and the change of shifts, groups gathered at precincts, and officers had to be escorted in and out of work. The nightly crowd management events placed unforeseen stresses on many systems in PPB, to include documentation, review, and analysis of force events. Each application of force requires a report that must be reviewed and analyzed by 3 analysts. This eventually took us out of substantial compliance with the city's settlement agreement. Moving on to a different topic is our critical staffing shortage. We currently have 803 sworn members out of an authorized 916. By the end of this month, that number will be in the 700s. We've had 145 sworn members leave in the last year. Our upcoming challenge is retention. Next year, 84 sworn employees are eligible to retire. Staffing impacts our response times. There are many critical incidents such as shootings or homicides where we need many officers to go to the scene. The rise in gun violence means our officers are responding to these and can affect response times to other crimes. It also affects response times because we have to take officers from other precincts sometimes to respond to calls for service. Not enough staffing impacts our proactive policing. We're limited to doing missions to try to focus on prolific thieves, drugs houses, chronic livability issues, and more that the community members say they want. It impacts our ability to conduct community policing. We hear from our community that they want to see us, talk to us, have us walk around neighborhoods and businesses. We see a wealth of experience going out the door to other agencies. Some units, such as our Special Emergency Response or Reaction Team or Explosive Disposal Unit, takes years of training. We've had experts in crisis training, gun violence, forensics, all leave in the past year. One of the most important elements in police work is having supervisors with experience to make critical decisions. We're losing that institutional knowledge that makes great supervisors. Staffing impacts investigations as well. We've tried our best to shore up some of our detective division by adding officers, which impacts patrol. But with record numbers of shootings and the dramatic increase in homicides, we've needed to add personnel. Low staffing impacts the psyche of officers. Our patrol officers are going call to call to call. They're constantly interacting with people in crisis. Our newer officers don't have any experience going to community meetings, walking around talking to folks not in crisis, or visiting with an advisory committee or neighborhood meeting. Our new officers are seeing a very one-dimensional part of police work. This also affects our budget. We use overtime to make minimum staffing in precincts if we can. The last challenge I want to discuss today is crime. There were 891 confirmed shooting incidents, a 130% increase over the 388 reported in 2019. There were 53 murders and 1 justifiable homicide. In 2020, murder increased more than 100% above the prior 10-year average. 2020 was the 5th year in a row with an increase in the aggravated assault rate. It's also important to note that 58 people died in traffic crashes on Portland streets in 2020. Property crime increased in 2020 as well, with a notable increase in arson, vandalism, and burglary, motor vehicle parts, and stolen vehicles. Thank you for your time today. I want to continue our dedication and pledge to serve the city. We ask that members of the City Council help us recruit the next generation. We need your help to encourage and support those who we need to fill both sworn and non-sworn roles in the Police Bureau. Individuals of all backgrounds and experiences help provide value to our agency and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Colleagues, do you have any questions? If not, I've got one. And not seeing a hand raised, maybe I'll just jump in here early. So, Chief, I think the reasonable center in this community, the people I hear from most frequently, see the need for an effective bureau and the need for an accountable bureau. In other words, most people, including myself, see the need for a police bureau that has the personnel, the resources, the tools, and the training necessary for the bureau to be effective in its role in reducing criminal activity in the community. In addition to that, people see the need for common sense improvements, reforms, changes, and you identified a couple of changes in this report that you think we need to make as a police bureau. But the bottom line is the public not only wants an effective police bureau, they want a bureau that is also accountable and transparent to the public that it serves. And it doesn't seem to me that these are mutually exclusive objectives. These seem to be things that we should be able to work together between the Bureau and the Council, between the city and the community to be able to implement. What do you see as the strategy going forward to bring the community together and ensuring that we have both an effective police bureau and an accountable police bureau? Where do you see us going from here based on the findings in your report?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I like the fact that you couched reforms as improvements, because that's how I see them, truly. We're at a time where there's reform coming to this profession and this organization, and we all need to be mindful of what those look like, what those improvements are, what the community wants to see out of its police bureau. And I think going forward, trust is really the foundation that we need to build off of. And we, the police bureau as an organization, needs to be transparent and honest about the things that are going well and the things that aren't, the things where we've misstepped and have to make improvements, and be willing to have those conversations and be honest and forthright with that, with the community. And I feel like this report this year really talks about some of the good and some of the not so good. And I think going forward, we're all in this together. And I feel like for the Police Bureau, the path forward is really through community trust and relationships. Officers back working in and connected to districts and communities where people know the officer who's likely to come to their door if they have a problem. And officers know people in the community who can help them solve problems and work on problems together. The approach of we need to call the police into our neighborhood to solve a problem, I think is flawed. I think we need to work together, and the police need to be part of that community and work on problems with the community together. And I think that's really, to me, the way we need to start stair-stepping and building back to that trust and legitimacy that we really all are striving for in the community.
Chief, thank you for that answer. And I just want to take an opportunity, first of all, to acknowledge you and your leadership during a very challenging time for the Portland Police Bureau and policing in general, locally as well as nationally. I want to thank the men and women who serve in the Portland Police Bureau. They've been under a lot of pressure and asked to do a lot during a very challenging time. And I want each and every one of our officers to know I do respect them. I do think it's important that we work together as a council to ensure that we have the adequate personnel and resources, the adequate tools and training for the men and women in our police bureau to be able to do their job effectively and feel that they have the support they need to do their job effectively. And I think collectively, and I'm speaking now as police commissioner and to you as chief, I believe collectively we also need to work to address the very real concerns that have been raised by the community and rise to the challenges and the opportunities to improve the way we police in this community. So I just want to, again, thank you for your service. I appreciate the partnership. I know that this is an issue that's of utmost importance to the community. We have a ton of work to do, but we're going to do it together. And I would encourage us to continue to engage people in the community all across the thought spectrum in terms of how we should improve policing. And I look forward to those opportunities going forward. So thank you for this report. Next up is Commissioner Ryan, then Commissioner Rubio.
Good morning, Chief Liddell. Good to see you. Thank you for that report. I was struck with, I think, the staffing concerns and how many are departing. And then what stuck with me is you asked us, basically you want partnerships and recruiting the next generation. Tell me more about what that looks like, because it does look like it's a big opportunity in terms of improvement and building this next generation of the police force. Just give me a little bit more narrative on what that looks like in terms of partnership.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is environment too. We have a lot of people leaving, going to other places, other police jobs, some that pay less. Some of them are going to places where they're starting at the bottom. They have to now, bid for shifts or work night shift and things of that nature. And I think some of them, that I talk to are like, I want to work in an environment where I feel valued. And I think to me, as city leaders, all of us, one of the most important things we can do is create an environment where people feel valued. They feel like the work that they're doing and the contributions they're making to the city are valued and wanted and respected by leadership. And I think that's a huge thing for us to always keep in perspective. And I think resources are important. That's more the council's purview than mine, but I'm always going to advocate for the resources necessary to do the work that we ask officers to do. And I think sometimes the thought process of police reform or defunding or taking away money doesn't always take into account that there's a certain resource need to fulfill the public safety requirements and goals of a city. And I think, that's also important for us to keep in our minds. And I think too, outreach. We all have circles and spheres of influence where we have people who we think will be really great police officers, city employees. Keep those people in mind, look for ways to outreach to them and show them that this is a good place to work and this might be some place they want to consider being a part of.
I think the ending there got to my question a bit because it's about culture change really is on the ground. And with this challenge, there's an opportunity because there's a lot of vacancies. So there's a lot of opportunities to hire new people to the police force. And I want to thank you for, I do note that you have police officers that are out and identify as non-binary. And so I think that's really important. So I just wanted to get more of a sense of where are you targeting some of those new recruits? And maybe it looks different than it was in the past. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we want a police force that represents the community. We want to be inviting. We want people to know that there's a place for them here. They'll be welcome. And, through our advisory councils, that's one of the ways we do a lot of outreach to potential employees. We have Alliance for Safer Communities. They've been a really big advocate for us in hiring. Through our Latino Advisory Council, we now have a good link to the Latino and Latinx community where we can do some outreach too. And I think it's constantly looking for opportunities to welcome and invite people in and let them know that we want them, they're valued, and that they can have a good career here.
Thank you, Chief Lavelle. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief. I appreciate the broader context that you've given about the challenging year that you've had and how resources have been spread thin. And all of this is happening while, as the mayor mentioned, we're responding to community needs for more transparency and accountability from the Bureau. And what I'm hearing from Portlanders are that we want both things, to feel safe and trusting of our community safety system, and also have one that is transparent and values the well-being of all Portlanders. And at the core of this is trust, as you mentioned, and reestablishing and building that trust, because it's critical to breaking through this impasse that I feel like we're in, and so that we can get to serving our city and our residents. So my question is a follow-up question to Commissioner Ryan about staffing. You've been very clear about the need for more staffing and budget. And you referenced the 145 officers that have left the Bureau this year. So I want to learn more about that and also understand more about this in the context of the current vacancies that you also mentioned. How can you help us understand the connection that you see between funding and retention? And then how will that funding actually move the Bureau towards reforms and improvements that you talked about?
Sure. And I think, we have a lot of vacancies right now. Last year, we received a budget cut that really hampered our ability to actually hire people into what would have been, vacancies. Typically, we use salary savings from vacancies to pay overtime to meet our needs on the street. And last year, we had vacant positions, not funding to fill. And part of the struggle for us is it's difficult to hire people and get them through the hiring process, through an academy, and then off probation, and then working on the street. That's a 2-year process. So the lead time is long for hiring a fully functioning, able to work the street by themselves police officer. And I think that was some of the struggle last year, was having the vacancies, but not the funding to actually fill those. And I think there's some worry that further reductions in our authorized strength will lower our authorized strength as well, below the 916 where it sits today, if we remove some positions off the books that are currently authorized but not funded. So I think those are some of the struggles as opposed to, or in regards to staffing and funding. And I think, I think there's a psychological piece to it too. For people to feel supported, I think they want to feel like, we are given the tools we need. We're given the ability to have the cover that we need on the street and the staffing to keep us safe when we do our work. So I think those are some of the ways that ties together.
And do you, just a quick follow-up to that, what role do you feel like leadership plays in that in terms of retention as well? And I'm just speaking as a former organizational leader myself, and I understand how critical leadership is during times of crisis or times of challenge. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts and the role of leadership in the Bureau.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, like I said earlier, making people feel valued, letting people know that we value the work that you're doing. The work you're doing is important and it's needed. And that's in the same context of, that work needs to be improved. It needs to be changed in some ways. We need to constantly look at ways to make it better. but the role that you play is still important. And I think to the extent that leadership can send that message to the employees in the police bureau and throughout the city is important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Maps.
Thank you, Chief, for this presentation. There's a lot here for us to chew on. Just so I'm clear, I just have a couple of factual questions I wanted to check in with you on. In your professional assessment, how many police officers do we need in order to meet minimum staffing requirements for the city?
I think, for me, if I have to look at a number, it depends on what, we're being asked to do at a certain time. But I feel like we need about 1,100 officers in order to do some of the important roles. Like right now, we don't have a full-time traffic division. A city our size, should have a full-time traffic division. Right now, we're dealing with overdoses and fentanyl and things of that nature. And, we had to roll our narcotics unit back into patrol to answer calls for service. And I think there's really work to be done in community engagement and some other divisions that we no longer have that I think would really move the needle and alleviate, some of the more chronic issues. Things like our neighborhood response teams are very popular in the community. Community groups and community members really like the detailed attention that they can give to chronic issues. So I think the ability to meet minimum staffing and have those other units to do those bodies of work is critically important.
Okay, that's very helpful. And how many police, I know you mentioned this in your report, how many police officers do we have today? We need 1,100 to meet our basic needs. How many do we have today?
We have 803 as of today.
803.
Yeah.
And do you have any intuition about what that number is likely to look like a year from now?
Well, I know in the next 2 weeks, we have about 8 more people leaving, to include some of the senior staff folks here at the Police Bureau. And we have, the number was 88, but I think it's 84 now because some have left early, who will be eligible to retire in July of next year. So just over a year out, we could see another potential cliff as far as retirements as well. So I think we're going to see fewer than we have today, that's for sure. So I think whatever we can do to look at ways to maybe retain some of those employees would be really important.
Okay, and just so I have the math in my head, so it seems like according to your professional assessment, we're down 300, 400 bodies compared to where we need to be.
Yeah, that would be my estimate.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Commissioner Maps, if I may as well, this has been a subject of great discussion between the chief and the command staff and my team. And obviously we're not going to be able to bring 300 officers on in one fell swoop. And so what we really need to do is present the council with a thoughtful strategy over some number of years to bring our staffing levels up to the point where we believe that we can be effective in addressing criminal activity in the community. And so I'm working with the chief on that. In fact, I think, Chief, tomorrow I'm getting my next briefing on that subject. And I look forward to bringing that to the council and working with the council to develop a consensus around how we are going to bring our staffing levels up to the minimum requirements at least.
Thank you for that clarification.
Commissioner Rubio.
I just want to make a comment that based on what you just said, Mayor, we're very interested in looking and being a part of that, any conversation around that. And I specifically am very interested in I'm looking at that nexus about retention and funding and how will additional resources move us towards the direction of reform that we want. That still remains a very open question to me that I would love to dig into and hear more about.
Yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner Rubio, and I appreciated our conversation yesterday on that subject as well. These things go hand in hand. making sure that we have the adequate resources, the tools, the training, the appropriate number of personnel, as the chief indicated, while also acknowledging the improvements that the community wants us to make, particularly around accountability and transparency. And so I do look forward to that. This really strikes me as an opportunity to bring the community together. There's sort of a division right now about police, no police, reform, no reform. And the right answer, of course, is it's not an either or, it's a both and. And so I look forward to helping develop that consensus for the council. Chief, I look forward to working with you and your team to make sure we're providing good, rational information to the city council so they can make a solid investment that's based on fact. So I appreciate everything you're saying today. Any other questions before I entertain a motion? Colleagues, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
So moves.
Was that Commissioner Mapps?
Yeah.
Commissioner Mapps moves the report. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ryan seconds. Any further discussion? Megan, please call the roll on the report.
Mapps.
I want to thank the chief and everyone over at the Police Bureau and our many volunteers who have participated in getting this presentation together. I also want to recognize the important work that our peace officers do. And I think this report also highlights the need for important reform. So we have a lot of work to do. I appreciate your leadership, Chief and Mr. Mayor, and I pledge my commitment to work with you to getting this right. For these reasons, I vote aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank the chief and the mayor for bringing this forward, and thank you, chief, for your leadership. It really has been a really full year for Portland, and I'm really interested in digging deeper into these questions and finding a way to lift up the well-being of all of our cities. So thank you, and I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Police Commissioner Wheeler and Chief LaBelle for this report. I appreciated not only the way you framed it into the three buckets, but also I really enjoyed our dialogue that we just had with some of the questions. I'm going to just end my remarks with a little story. I had a chance to meet two of your new recruits at a training through the city. And then I know of another one who just recently came on board. I give these words to say that they're all three just happen to be female, two are of color, and they are excited to do community policing. They want to serve the city in a way that I think the vast majority of Portlanders would be thrilled with them being on the police force. And going back to my questions, it's how can we take this challenge and turn it into the biggest opportunity for change? And I really do think it'll be about recruitment and having those people with fire in their belly to love this city and serve it in a humane way. And so I just want you to know this council is there to support the evolution. I think most people are for reform because most people like improvements. So, and I know you speak in that language. So I'm here to vote aye, and thank you for the report.
Wheeler.
Chief, before I vote, if the public wants to see the report that you're referencing, where can they find it?
It is on our webpage, and we're also doing precinct meetings. We did the first last night, North Precinct. They're on Zoom and they've been advertised. We have one tonight and one tomorrow night, so they can come and hear a synopsis of the report and ask questions as well.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chief, for the discussion today. I vote aye. The report is accepted. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, Megan, we'll move back to the regular agenda. I believe 640 is our next item. This is a emergency ordinance.
Amend Joint Office of Homeless Services intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County to authorize FY 2021-22 revised budget allocation to the Joint Office of Homeless Services.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Joint Office is a pivotal partner in a response to save lives and secure shelter and housing for individuals and families experiencing homelessness, including during the COVID-19 pandemic and during our severe weather seasons. The Joint Office oversees the city's investment in preventing and ending homelessness through contracts with community organizations, who in turn provide critical housing and support services to individuals and families experiencing houselessness each year. With this ordinance, the city intends to amend the IGA to authorize City Council's approved 21-22 annual budget allocation to the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Funding will support implementation of priorities through a Home for Everyone collaborative, including supporting existing capacity and programming for housing placement and retention, supportive housing, emergency shelter, and other safety off-street services, diversion, and homelessness prevention efforts. Additional funding is available through this amendment to support COVID-19 emergency responses, including rent assistance and shelters to adhere to the physical distancing procedures, which tend to come and go with changing forecasts. And then we can implement those health standards at our existing shelters and new spaces. I want to welcome Jennifer Chang and Mike Johnson from the Portland Housing Bureau, and they are here to answer any questions.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan, and good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Jennifer Chang with the Portland Housing Bureau, and in my capacity there, I serve as the contract manager of the Joint Office IGA between the city and the county. And Commissioner Ryan provided a great overview of this amendment. It mainly is authorizing the annual budget for the Joint Office for fiscal year 21-22, which has already been approved by City Council. It includes a total of, excuse me, 39.6 million, of which 29 million are city funds, and then the remaining 10.6 million are different federal funds, including regular year allocation funds, as well as several millions of dollars of funds we've received in our community for COVID response. And this is helping to provide operations for emergency shelters, as well as get emergency rent assistance to households in need. So I'm here to answer any questions that any of you may have. I'm also joined by Shannon Callahan, our Housing Bureau Director, and Adam Brown from the Joint Office of Homeless Services.
I'll jump in. Maybe Commissioner Ryan, this is a question for you, or maybe it's a question for the Joint Office of Homeless Services. There's been a lot of discussion over the course of the last year about where is the appropriate balance between long-term stable housing for people who are on our streets versus the immediate needs to get people into more humane alternatives to some of the camps that we see around the city. By humane, I mean a place where they have access to toilets, to running water, potentially navigation services towards housing or mental health or substance abuse, or domestic survivorship services or other services. Does this reflect any change in the balance between the delivery of those services, the longer term housing stabilization versus the immediate need to get people into more humane circumstances than what our constituents are concerned about today?
Sure. Well, as you know, from having this role prior to me and being on the Home for Everyone Executive Committee, there's been some robust dialogue about the tension that is at the table when you put those together. I think what you've seen from this council, based on our dialogue and meetings, but also work sessions, is that we have really been united in knowing that there is a reasonable gap, if you will, between those in unsanctioned camping in a city not built for unsanctioned camping, no city is, and those that are receiving services with our amazing providers. So there is that gap. And so we're addressing that gap, as you know, by investments that we're making in bringing not just shelter, but also services to the ground. We're in the early stages of identifying those properties and getting those services going. So I think what you've seen with the way we're targeting our investment from ARPA. And what you're also seeing is in the discussions that we had at the meetings at Home for Everyone Executive Committee, when we were looking at the Metro Here Together investments, is really leaning in to more and more services that can get to our houseless residents as quickly as possible so they can build resilience. And they really go together, because when someone is receiving the services, behavioral health, mental health, then when they are placed in some longer permanent housing, the retention rates, I'm sure, will go way up. And we will have data sets that will look at that. And we will, of course, always adjust and learn as we go along. So I would just give you that as a summary for the public, because I know I sit in some of those same meetings with you, Mayor Wheeler. Adam Brown, if you want to add anything from the joint office, go ahead and have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Adam Brown here, Business Manager for the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan, and thank you, Mayor, for your question. So I think, just to sort of reiterate what Commissioner Ryan said, with regard to the Joint Office's base budget, the base budget looks much this year like it did last year. But obviously we know with regard to the public dialogue and the dialogue with our stakeholders that the visible street homelessness and those issues are pressing for our community, and those are a top priority for us. So we've made additional investments in those areas as part of our COVID budget. There are additional investments with regard to the Safe Rest Villages allocations, the allocations for outdoor physical distancing shelters. So there are considerable investments in this budget. In the Joint Office is this item here today is Amendment 11. This is the city funding, that's coming over for the Joint Office, but the Joint Office's county side budget includes a whole array of other funding sources that definitely make more investments in the issues that you're raising.
Thank you for that, Adam. I appreciate that context. And Commissioner Ryan, thank you for your leadership on this. The Safe Rest Villages and the other work that you've been doing, in particular, to find humane alternatives to the unsanctioned camps that we're seeing today. I really appreciate, in particular, your leadership on that front. And it's also worth noting, we're talking about the city's general fund contribution to the Joint Office. And there are, as Adam pointed out, completely separate conversations around the county's allocation, some of which goes to public health services. And we haven't even mentioned the Here Together dollars, which the community broadly supported for the purpose of helping find strategies to support people who are moving from the streets, either into shelter or into housing, in particular things like mental health services and substance abuse treatment and the like. And so what I'd like the community to take away from this is there's lots of pieces to this focused around an entire spectrum of services that start with, as the last item indicated, keeping people in their housing, particularly people who are holding on to that housing with something of a tenuous grip. And then for those who do tip into homelessness, making sure that we can act as quickly and swiftly as possible to get people off the streets and into a more humane set of circumstances. And then, of course, the longer term goal here is to make sure that ultimately we find stabilized and supported housing for a very vulnerable population on our streets. And so all of these resources have to come together in a way that makes sense. And so I want to applaud everybody for your hard work on this, particularly you, Commissioner Ryan. Thank you for taking up the mantle. And if there is no further discussion on this is an emergency ordinance. I'll ask Megan if there's any public testimony.
No one signed up for this item.
Kind of surprised by that. With that then, this is an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Maps?
Aye.
Rubio?
I want to thank you, Commissioner Ryan, for your leadership, and also the Housing Bureau staff and the Joint Office for your work on this. These are critical services, and I vote aye.
Ryan?
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer and Adam, for being here. It was a good conversation. I appreciate the questions. Mayor Wheeler, I vote aye.
Wheeler?
This might be a good time just to mention that before council, I had the opportunity to meet with a group of mayors from across the country, and the meeting was hosted by Congresswoman Beatty. And the subject was this. It was the growth of homelessness, not just on the West Coast, but indeed across the country, how local jurisdictions were responding and what kind of support Congress could provide at the national level. And I came out of that meeting on one hand daunted by the size of the problem, the scope of the problem that we are seeking to resolve, but also a sense of optimism, because I'm understanding now that this is being seen as not just a local humanitarian catastrophe, but as a national humanitarian catastrophe. And so, colleagues, I felt based on that conversation quite confident that there are people in Congress fighting hard to help local jurisdictions like us overcome some of the problems and obstacles around homelessness. And I thought I would share that with you this morning. Commissioner Ryan, thank you for this ordinance. Thank you to your team and to the Housing Bureau. Adam, thank you for the work that you do and the work that the Joint Office of Homeless Services does. This problem will be with us for some time, but as I hope you can see, you have a city council that is unified in working together and supporting you and others in terms of the delivery of services. It's also worth noting that we need to work together across jurisdictional boundaries because the public at large doesn't really care whose responsibility it is. And as proof of that, there is an op-ed in, I believe it's today's Oregonian, it may have been in there yesterday, around mental health services. And the op-ed is written by two individuals who I highly respect, who have a great deal of knowledge about mental health issues as they pertain to people living on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor is frozen. Looks like Commissioner Rubio, are you frozen too? What do we do, Commissioner Raps?
As well.
Oh, there he's back. You're back.
Oh, is my internet off again?
Yeah, the city hall internet is failing us at the moment.
Oh, this is bad.
Megan, are you there? What do you think? We take a little tiny recess?
Mental health services.
There it is.
To help. So, any rate, I vote aye. And the ordinance is adopted. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah. We missed a little bit of it, but you landed it. Yeah.
Did at least you get my vote? That's the important part.
You got your vote. That's where I said you landed it, right?
Great. Okay, good. We really should have upgraded from the abysmal internet connection to at least the mediocre internet connection. But I vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is 641, please.
Authorize a subrecipient contract for $440,000 for the provision of services in support of stabilizing tenants.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, colleagues, the ordinance before council would allow the Portland Housing Bureau to enter into a contract for $440,000 with the Oregon Law Center for the provision of free legal representation to low-income tenants facing eviction. The Eviction Legal Defense Program for low-income tenants will be the newest program service of the Rental Services Office. The review panel for this ordinance was unanimous in their selection of the Oregon Law Center. The panel included a diverse range of representatives from numerous BIPOC communities, tenant service providers, as well as affordable housing providers. With that, I will turn this over to Christina Dirks and Briona Dedecker from the Rental Services Office to present the ordinance. Please take it away.
Hi, Commissioner. Before Brion and Christina, I just wanted to share a few remarks. It wasn't on the sheet, so I apologize. For the record, Matthew Schaubel, the Policy and Planning Manager with the Portland Housing Bureau. And I just wanted to share with Council that I am pleased that the Housing Bureau and the Rental Services Office is was able to identify the funding to implement this new eviction legal defense program. Eviction legal defense programs and right to counsel programs exist all over the country. And very pleased that two of our newest staff were able to work with community and folks at the Bureau to develop this program on a fairly rapid timeline. And so our new manager of our rental services office, Breon Dedecker, and our new policy and programming coordinator, who you've met before, Christina Dirks, will take it away and give you an overview of this initiative and answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Christina, do you want to go ahead and share your screen? Goodness. As Matt was saying, today we are here to talk to you about our newest program. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan and Matt, for the wonderful introductions. The Eviction Legal Defense Program will increase access to legal representation for low-income tenants facing termination of their subsidy or eviction from their housing. The goal is to increase housing stability for tenants, particularly BIPOC households that are most vulnerable to evictions and their negative consequences. PHB will be contracting with the Oregon Law Center to offer free legal services to income qualifying tenants. Other components of the ELD program are an outreach and engagement plan to reach some of the most at-risk households and a robust data and evaluation component to measure the program's impact on low-income tenants in Portland. We will be using the recently approved ARPA funding for eviction defense to expand this program to meet the anticipated widespread community need and to provide eligible tenants with rental assistance. You can go to the slide with the map. Ensuring tenants have access to legal representation is a growing movement nationwide. Currently, 3 states, Washington, Connecticut, and Maryland, and 8 cities, including Seattle, Cleveland, Louisville, Baltimore, LA, and Charlottesville, have right to counsel programs. A key difference between the PHB's eviction legal defense programs and right to counsel programs is that a right to counsel means income eligible tenants facing an eviction have a right to a lawyer guaranteed in their city or state codes. Many of these right to counsel programs include education and outreach for tenants and landlords, and often require landlords to notify tenants of their right to counsel when filing an eviction against the tenant. Go to the next slide. Investing in eviction legal defense improves court outcomes for tenants and increases housing stability for vulnerable renters. In Cleveland, data from the Right to Counsel program showed 93% of represented tenants avoided an eviction. Oh, did we go off the PowerPoint?
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties on my end. I'll be with you in 1 minute.
Okay.
You're doing a great job, though.
Thanks for on the
following the arrow. All right, there you are.
There we go.
Is it back?
Yeah.
Yes, it's back. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. It's hard in this remote environment. So in Cleveland, data from the Right to Counsel program showed 93% of represented tenants avoided an eviction or an involuntary move out. In Philadelphia, represented tenants were twice as likely as unrepresented tenants to receive a favorable judgment in court. And in New York City, eviction filings dropped by 41% following the enactment of their right to counsel. We can go to the next slide. So eviction defense programs also save city money. In Philadelphia, a return on investment study performed by an investment bank estimated that the city would save $12.74 for every dollar spent on a right to counsel program. These savings would accrue from reducing municipal spending on far more expensive services for individuals and families following their eviction, such as shelter costs and inpatient hospital costs. Beyond such direct cost savings, lowering the eviction rate and increasing housing stability has additional positive economic and social impacts, such as improved childhood education outcomes and increased family and community stability. Following the release of the study, Philadelphia City Council voted to enact and fully fund a right to counsel program. So with an outlay of $3.5 million, they would save an estimated $45.2 million. Now I will turn the presentation over to Christina, who will touch on why this program is needed in Portland and some of its anticipated impacts.
Good morning, Council. Christina Dirks from Portland Housing Bureau. I'm the rental policy program coordinator. Thanks for your patience with the technical difficulties. And now it's not advancing because that's just how my morning is going. There we go. So national studies have shown that evictions and their resulting negative impacts disproportionately impact BIPOC households headed by women, and households with children. These findings bear out in Portland, where communities of color, particularly Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities disproportionately rent, work in the service industry, and earn less than the annual household income needed to afford the median rent in the city. We also know that there is no neighborhood in the city of Portland that is affordable to a single mother-headed household. While poverty is often the cause of eviction, evictions push renters further into poverty. Evictions exacerbate the hardships already experienced by our most vulnerable populations. Evictions have proven detrimental impacts, such as physical and mental health, lead to job loss, result in poor educational performance by children, and make it harder to find safe and affordable replacement housing. By increasing access to legal counsel when facing eviction, this program aims to protect these vulnerable renters from the lasting long-term impacts of eviction. As Brianne discussed earlier, eviction tenants with legal counsel see significantly better outcomes during an eviction proceeding. Here we have shown the rates of representation through the Eviction Legal Defense Project. You'll see in 2019, there was 5,904 eviction filings in Multnomah County. This was before there was any eviction legal defense program funding. And at that time, 1 in 33 tenants had a lawyer. So 3% of tenants were represented in 2019. We've projected out for 2022, the rate of eviction filings we used the 2019 numbers and added 15% to account for what we suspect is going to be the increased filings due to non-payment of rent when deferred rent from the eviction moratorium becomes due in February 2022. With that number and with the infusion of one-time ARPA funds, we are able to scale up the Eviction Legal Defense Program to provide every income eligible tenant with an attorney. We have also projected out for 2024 to give a sense.
So she's frozen. Can you take over?
Yes. Yeah, I can take over.
Okay.
So in 2024, it'll be a little bit hard. Oh, Christine, are you back?
Yeah. Did I freeze?
Okay. You froze. So you're right at 2024 on the last slide.
Okay, thank you. So we projected out to 2024 to show council what the Eviction Legal Defense Program rates of representation would be with the funding amount before you in the contract with the Oregon Law Center and without the ARPA infusion of one-time federal funds. And you will see there that we have, with the 2019 eviction filing rate, we anticipate that eviction filing rate will be higher in 2024. There's just too many unknown variables to be able to meaningfully project what that filing rate will be. But based on a filing of 5,904 filings in 2024, with the program budget outlined with the funds before you, we will be able to provide legal representation to 1 in every 3 income eligible tenants. The next slide here, there it is essentially the same information, just in a different visual depiction of the rates of representation with the various levels of funding. 2019 with no program funding, 2022 fully funded with the one-time ARPA funds, and then 2024 would be back to the $440,000 program budget before you today. And I want to point out that in 2022, in order to receive those full rates of representation, how important it's going to be to build in this education and outreach component into the program and make it robust and meaningful. This education outreach effort is going to focus on doing door knocking, outreach education to locations and neighborhoods, which are the eviction epicenters based on real-time eviction filing data, targeting neighborhoods with large BIPOC populations, as well as neighborhoods of historical displacement of BIPOC renters. As Commissioner Ryan mentioned, after a thorough RFQ process with involvement by external stakeholders and community members, the Bureau selected Oregon Law Center to be the program provider. The Oregon Law Center has extensive experience representing low-income tenants in both eviction court as well as landlord-tenant matters. They have deep connections in the community that we know will facilitate engagement with these critical services and help build trust. OLC is currently operating eviction defense program funded by Multnomah County, and the eviction legal defense program funding will allow them to scale up the existing intake and capacity to touch on more households and provide these meaningful services. And with that, we have an invited panel. Becky Strauss of the Oregon Law Center is here, as well as Ian Davey from Home Forward and Dr. Lisa Bates from Portland State University. And I'd like to turn it over to Becky Strauss of the Oregon Law Center.
Thank you, Christina. Mayor Wheeler, members of the City Council, my name is Becky Strauss. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an attorney with the Oregon Law Center. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to testify in support of this contract for the eviction legal defense program that you were proposed today. As you know, the Oregon Law Center is a statewide nonprofit law firm whose mission is to achieve justice for low-income communities of Oregon by providing a full range of the highest quality legal services. Helping families maintain safe, stable housing is a critical part of our work. Without stable housing, it is difficult or impossible to hold down a job, keep children in school, access neighborhood amenities, and stay healthy. Even prior to the pandemic, access to safe, stable, and affordable housing had become one of the most important issues facing our clients across the state, and now well into the pandemic. These challenges are, of course, ever more acute. In this context, OLC sits at a unique vantage point to understand the nuances of the pandemic-related eviction crisis. Historically, with our sister organization, Legal Aid Services of Oregon, or LASO, our offices have always prioritized eviction defense work, and in recent months, as Christina mentioned, we've expanded further our capacity to take these cases. We're using funds from Multnomah County through, as the mayor in the prior item was referencing, the Here Together bond. We've been awarded a grant through the Metro Supportive Housing Services bond, or the Here Together bond, to bring on new attorneys, and have stood up a program to outreach to tenants in eviction court and are providing legal services to every single tenant who contacts us with an eviction court case. We're excited about this contract that would bring this work into the portfolio of the Portland Housing Bureau. We're looking forward to working with the city to provide legal services within the city's eviction defense program framework. The program bolsters our optimism that we can meaningfully sustain these housing stability services going forward. We have built the infrastructure to do so, and will rely on this contract to scale up, expand, and get closer to meeting the need. Part of our current OLC program and the program going forward includes a docket watch and data collection aspect. We are amassing an unprecedented amount of information about the types of cases in eviction court, the implementation of pandemic-related eviction legal protections, and how tenants are faring when they're confronted with an eviction, and more. We are partnering with PSU, who you will hear from in a bit, to help us analyze and visualize the data. We're using the data as a basis to troubleshoot when we see how the process is failing the Portlanders that the system is set up to protect. Our findings through this data collection and docket watch are stark, and they illustrate the need for this city program. As pandemic era eviction moratoria lapse and the state struggles with administration of millions of dollars of rent assistance, eviction cases have ramped up. An increasing number of tenants are finding themselves in eviction court in one of two very common circumstances. One, they have a viable legal defense, but no attorney to advise them or to raise the defenses in court on their behalf. And so they're losing and getting displaced. Or two, they are facing eviction for non-payment, and their only legal option is to connect with a rent assistance provider or an attorney to help them access their rights under Senate Bill 278 to apply for rent assistance and delay the eviction. A third scenario that is also related and is particularly relevant to the expansion under this Portland contract is related to terminations other than non-payment of rent. Throughout the moratorium and historically in eviction court, we have been seeing tenants facing displacement for reasons other than non-payment of rent, specifically alleged lease violations or sometimes no-cause evictions and others. Large numbers of these eviction cases are flatly unlawful on their face. the landlord didn't provide a lawful reason, the requisite notice of rights to tenants was omitted, the right amount of time was not included for the tenant to move out, and yet the system of eviction relies on tenants knowing their rights and having the wherewithal to assert their rights and defend themselves in court. Without a lawyer, tenants are set up for failure. In Multnomah County this year, Christina provided some 2019 numbers. Our numbers for this year are showing that landlords in Multnomah County were represented by an attorney in about half of the eviction cases. By contrast, tenants had an attorney in about 6% of the cases. That data is a couple weeks old. Legal services intervention for tenants in eviction cases relies on a tenant to affirmatively reach out to our offices or some other legal office for help. In pre-pandemic times, thousands of tenants each year with a right to stay in their housing fail either to appear in court or to raise the legal defenses available to them. The wheels of eviction court churn without adequate interventions that might preserve housing stability and prevent further inflow into our homeless services systems. With this contract, the city will step into this space and begin to support a program that would not only promote accessibility of legal services to tenants at multiple points of their eviction case, including upstream before a landlord takes the tenant to court in the first place. The program could target outreach to communities most vulnerable to eviction and most likely to suffer irreversible harm with that eviction judgment. Oregon Law Center has the legal expertise, the community partnerships, and the program infrastructure to hit the ground running with these new funds, and we're excited to get to work. Thank you to the City Council and the Portland Housing Bureau for bringing this proposal forward, and we urge your support. Thanks for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Becky. Next, we'd like to have Dr. Lisa Bates from Portland State University testify.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. I have been working closely with Becky Strauss and Oregon Law Center for quite some time, as well as with a number of our tenant serving organizations, to try to, through the university and the resources that we have, to shed additional light on what is happening with evictions. Nationally, our knowledge and data about the eviction landscape is very spotty. And even though eviction, the coming eviction tsunami has been a huge issue, obviously, in the pandemic news, it's mostly raising questions about what has happened, what will happen, and very few places have the ability to actually track that in any kind of real time. The most prominent national data set on evictions is only updated to 2016. So can't possibly tell us how we can move forward now. So this means that here in our city, we're not able to have real insight into one of the primary active mechanisms of housing displacement that happen, eviction as a form of displacement that most heavily affects and disproportionately affects Black women, all families with children, immigrants and refugee identified folks, and people with disabilities. So we know that it's a very serious equity issue. And as Becky shared, actually our most recent update of data is that about 70% of landlords have attorneys in court, compared to only about 8% in Multnomah County. It's actually a much bigger gap in representation than the state as a whole. So we really need to have real-time tracking of cases that we're able to monitor the sort of wave of evictions, which is coming. We haven't hit the tsunami because of the protections that we have in place, but it is coming. We're also able at PSU to not only track those data in real time, providing daily support to legal services firms with the docket, to provide kind of a weekly real-time update on a number of key features, but also to add analysis of these filings with the support of Oregon Law Center on the validity of filings, to add process information by observing in court to see how tenants are actually able to access services like interpretation and translation services that they need. And to do this really critical equity analysis to understand what is happening for for folks of color, for families with kids, for folks with disabilities, and to also be able to link up geodatabases to target neighborhoods, buildings, and to understand the qualitative experience to round out sort of our equity analysis. I think this work will help us to understand the engagement between research and services, and evaluation loop that helps to continue to refine services, to understand the outcomes, and to sort of build this practice of having action and evaluation supporting implementation of different kinds of interventions. We'll be able to work with the city and with the service partners, not only on this continual real-time updating, but also on larger statistical evaluations of the impacts of the work when we have enough cases to do that, so that we can really maximize those impacts for housing stability, understanding the points of intervention, the people who are best served, and refining the programming through that work. So I'm glad to be a partner in this work, and I look forward to being able to share very soon some of our baseline reporting on what is happening in 2021 in evictions in Multnomah County.
Thank you, Dr. Bates. Next, we have Ian Davey from Home Forward.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners Ryan, Rubio, and MAPS. Thank you to Shannon, Matt, Breon, and Christina of the Housing Bureau, and to other colleagues who have testified in support of the social justice fight. My name is Ian Davey. I am the Deputy Executive Director at Home Forward, the Vice Chair of the Rental Services Commission, which advises Commissioner Ryan and Council on landlord and tenant issues. And I'm also a former legal services attorney. I spent 8 years doing anti-eviction legal services work in the South Bronx neighborhood in New York City. So we know that based on data at Home Forward, pre-pandemic data, about 2/3 of cases that appear in eviction court are due to non-payment of rent. And we also know that non-payment of rent is just another way of saying an inability to pay the rent. And if you distill that down further, it's another way of saying that people live in chronic poverty and experience emergencies. Our society continues to treat this as okay, that people can be unhoused due to poverty emergencies. And providing this emergency rent assistance takes the first step in addressing this problem. So then the other problem that we're able to solve with this initiative is the court and the legal system. I spent a lot of time in the court and legal system, and I can say that we still use terms like notice to cure, warranty of habitability, right to peaceful enjoyment. Those terms are slightly better than some of the Latin terms, ex parte, pro se, res judicata, de minimis. I'm sure that some of my lawyer friends are smiling here. And I would argue that those words are even better than some of the words that somehow haven't changed since medieval feudal times. Landlord, tenant are a couple examples there. So what's the point here? The point is that this is a pretty complicated system, and lawyers like those at the Oregon Law Center are advocates who can ensure access to this complicated system. So from a practical standpoint, you all saw some of the statistics, and we know that these approaches aren't novel. Bigger cities and states have paired legal defense and emergency rent assistance for years. And in my experience in New York, an expansion of funding had very, very direct impacts and frankly, culture changes in the courtroom. Some stats, which I think you saw before, but I'll reiterate. Nearly 38% of tenants in New York City are now represented, up from about 1% when I first started practicing there well over a decade ago. Evictions by city marshals in New York City have declined by 41% since 2013, when an expansion really happened at scale, and 86% of represented tenants are able to remain in their homes. As Dr. Bates highlighted, there are immediate downstream impacts for important communities, for Black and Brown folks, for kids and families, for renters with disabilities. I'll conclude by saying that I believe housing is a human right, and yet I've seen how society, how we have not done the work to perfect and ensure that right. I know each of you has seen walking around our communities and our city, how society also hasn't protected that right. And in my view, this program takes a pretty solid step in the right direction. So I end with enthusiastic support And I thank the Housing Bureau and all of you for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that's it. Yes. All right. Back to you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Thank you, everybody who testified. Before, well, I'll ask you if anybody has any questions of the panel at this point. If not, I'll ask Megan if we have any public testimony on this item. Megan?
Yes, we have one person on the call.
Why don't we go ahead and let them testify? 3 minutes, name for the record.
Right, Edith Gillis.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. So I wanted to say that I really am grateful that you're doing something to address housing as a human right, and that you're investing the money, taking the time, and listening to some excellent testimony. We definitely need legal representation. I was trying to also testify about items 641 and 642, but my doctor called me. I had to go off the line, so I'm a little confused. Is it too late to also testify on 641 and 642 and 643?
We are on item 641 right now, Edith.
Thank you. So I wanted to say, yes, please include this, and also make sure that the physical location and the access to it is spread throughout the city in more places. And also, I'd like us to have a percentage of landlords taking the money in go towards paying for this, and better training for landlords on how to not just use the law to screw tenants, but to be good neighbors and good citizens.
Thank you. All right, very good. This is an emergency ordinance. If there's nothing else, Megan, please call the roll.
Maps.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Ryan and the Housing Bureau for bringing this important item forward and helping to keep Portlanders housed. For these reasons, I vote aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank Commissioner Ryan and the Housing Bureau staff and partners, the Oregon Law Center, and all those who served on the planning and review panels for your work on this. This is such an important and critical service, and it has real life consequences for our community. And these eviction defense services will be critical in the coming months, increasingly. We're in a time, it's very critical, where we need to be doing all we can on all fronts if we want to uphold those values that, as Ian said, seeing housing as a human right in Portland. And I'm really committed to this, and I know my colleagues are too. So I'm pleased to see this work taking shape. I vote aye.
Brian.
Yes, thank you, Housing Bureau leadership. And this is a wonderful panel. Your slideshow that was presented really did have compelling data, which Ian brought home further. And I'm really grateful we have PSU on board at the ground here, so we can really look at 2024, which was concerning to look at that data. So we will be able to track that, because you were mentioning that you could get some level setting data soon. Anyway, this is definitely the right investment at the right time. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Thank you. This seems like a common sense, smart proposal. I appreciate everybody who testified, and I'm very happy to vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 642, please.
Mayor, would you like me to read 642 and 643 together?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Authorize conveyance of city-owned real property located at 3000 Southeast Powell Boulevard to Home Forward and financing for amount not to exceed $33,063,000 to 3000 Powell Limited Partnership or a Home Forward affiliate for development of a new 206-unit affordable housing project. Item 643.
Sorry.
Thank you. Authorize payment to Home Forward Development Enterprises Corporation for an option agreement securing site control of southern portion of 3032 Southeast Powell in amount not to exceed $727,099.
Thank you, Megan. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, colleagues, this is exciting. The 3000 Southeast Portland development is the 8th project to combine capital funds from the Portland Housing Bureau with funding for supportive services from the Joint Office for Homeless Services to provide housing for the most vulnerable residents. This is a unique project. It leverages a city-owned site in an amenity-rich location to serve the Creston-Kilworth community, a high opportunity area that is also experiencing extreme market pressures and gentrification. The 3000 Southeast Powell project will provide much needed housing for residents in inner Southeast Portland. The project is close to major retailers, 2 full-service groceries, a food co-op, pharmacy. We have Grant Elementary School, Hosford Middle, and Cleveland High School. And it's also near the Community Music Center of Creston, Kilworth, and Powell Parks. We thank the developer Home Forward for purchasing the adjacent 3032 Southeast Powell site to increase housing opportunities for low-income families and individuals, including communities of color and people experiencing houselessness during this time of great economic uncertainty. The entire 3032 Southeast Powell site is not required to build the 3000 Southeast Powell affordable housing project. Portland Housing Bureau does have the opportunity to acquire site control of the southern portion of this lot for further affordable home ownership development. I have the pleasure of turning this over to Portland Housing Director Shannon Callahan and Home Forward Executive Director Michael Bonnecourt to present this project. Please take it away, Shannon.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau, and as Commissioner Ryan said, following me will be the Executive Director of Home Forward. Megan, would you mind pulling up the PowerPoint if you can? As the Commissioner noted, today we are seeking your approval for financing of the development of new affordable rental housing at 30th and Southeast Powell, and the purchase option of a portion of the property for future development for home ownership. Next slide, please, Megan. 30th and Powell is a Portland housing bond project. It will be the 8th project, as the Commissioner mentioned, to begin construction, joining 2 other properties that are already open and providing affordable homes to Portlanders. The project will contribute to reaching and exceeding our goals for the Portland Housing Bond, specifically for deeply affordable housing, supportive housing, and family-sized units. Next slide, please, Megan. The Portland Housing Bureau originally purchased the site at 30th and Powell as part of our commitment to provide housing opportunity aligned with transportation access along the Powell Division bus rapid transit project. As you can see, it joins 5 other projects to reach our commitment for that transportation alignment. Next slide, please. In addition to transportation access, 30th and Powell site will provide many opportunities for its new residents, as Commissioner Ryan noted, being close to grocery stores, parks, schools, and other amenities. The site itself also provided us an opportunity to improve the neighborhood with new, high-quality, well-designed housing and the removal of the former Safari Club. The property itself has posed many challenges for redevelopment, including access issues from Powell, as it is designated as a state highway, creating connectivity to the neighborhood from the property, and the existence of both private and public easements, as well as soil that was filled in many decades ago, which required environmental work and a deeper foundation. Next slide, please. Working closely with Home Forward, we work to overcome these challenges because of the possibility to both transform the neighborhood and to create much needed affordable housing in an environment with so many amenities for its residents. To overcome some of these challenges, including a private easement, we decided to purchase the abutting property to resolve those easement issues, and because it will provide an even better development with more light, air, space for landscaping, trees, gardens, and a playground, and an overall better living environment and community for the residents. Next slide, please. The property will be a new 4-story building with an emphasis on family housing and serving people exiting homelessness. It will provide 206 new units, housing an estimated 354 people. It will provide 30 units of supportive housing and 68 total deeply affordable housing units that will serve households that make less than 30% of area median income. For a family of 4, that means a family that is surviving on less than $29,000 a year. The remainder of the 138 units will serve families at incomes of less than 60% of area median income. Next slide, please. The property will have 65 family-sized units, including both 2 and 3 bedrooms. Rents will start as low as $483, though many of those units will also be subsidized by federal vouchers, which will reduce the monthly amount a resident pays to make that housing affordable for extremely low or no income households. The property will be regulated for 99 years of affordability. It will be seeking gold certification from Earth Advantage, and each unit will also include air-conditioned living areas for the residents. Construction is expected to begin next month and welcome residents home in June of 2023. Next slide. In addition to the physical comforts of the building will provide resident services like food security assistance, youth services, employment services, medical and mental health care. And supportive services will be funded by the Joint Office of Homeless Services provided by El Programa Hispana Católica. Next slide. The Portland Housing Bond funds make this project possible, but they also leverage an additional $49 million from sources like tax credits provided by Oregon Housing and Community Services and funded by Bank of America. Next slide, please. In addition to the approval of the financing, we are also asking you to approve the purchase option of the southern portion of 3032 Southeast Powell, the majority of which will be used by Home Forward as part of the new rental affordable housing development. But once Home Forward develops that property and no longer needs the southern portion during the construction phase, the Portland Housing Bureau will then initiate the purchase and use the southern portion for future homeownership development. Next slide. This graphic depicts the 30th and Powell site, along with new vehicle access, as well as the remainder of the lot, which will be developed, as I mentioned, for homeownership. Next slide. Before I turn it over to Michael Bonacore, the Executive Director of Home Forward, I would like to thank the team at the Portland Housing Bureau and our City Attorney's Office for working through the purchase and acquisition, the demolition, and the myriad of challenges this development has presented. I'd also like to express my gratitude to Michael and the team at Home Forward for their extraordinary commitment to this project. As I mentioned, it has been a site full of challenges, and it took their time, expertise, additional staffing, and financial resources to overcome. Home Forward stepped forward to purchase the site at 3032 to address easement issues, but also because it allowed for a better living environment for the residents that will call it home. Thank you for being such good partners and your commitment to the future residents. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Shannon. Mayor Wheeler, commissioners, good morning. My name is Michael Bonacore. I'm the Executive Director of Home Forward, and I will be brief since Shannon really covered the important points, but I do want to reiterate and return the appreciation to Shannon and her team. This project really called upon the different areas of expertise between the city and Home Forward to overcome significant barriers, and the housing that will be created there will serve generations and improve the neighborhood and will be beautiful. We are planning a groundbreaking on September 20th at 11:30. If you haven't already gotten your invitations, you certainly will. And I hope to see all of you there. If for some reason you're not able to come to the groundbreaking, I encourage you to stop by the site and just take in how big a piece of land that is and just get a sense of the promise of the housing that will be there very soon. So we look forward to getting out of the ground and then fast forwarding to a ribbon cutting and housing 206 more households with affordable housing in a great location. So again, thank you for all of your support and Portland Housing Bureau for your partnership. I'm joined today, in case there are any technical questions, by two of my colleagues who have also worked really hard to bring this together, Amanda Saul and Ben Loftus. And I want to thank them and the Home Forward team as well. And I'll stop. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation, Commissioner.
Thank you. Mayor, back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for the presentation. Appreciate it very much. That was enlightening. Colleagues, do you have questions on either 642 or 643 before I ask for public testimony? Seeing none, Megan, do we have any testimony for either 642 or 643? I think Edith was interested, maybe somebody else.
Yep, we just have Edith on the call for that item.
All right. Edith, go ahead for combined items 642 and 643.
I'm concerned that 138 units are for 30% of the poorer people. And it's still at rents just for a studio of $483 a month, which is exorbitantly, extremely too high and impossible for so many of Portlanders. I would like you to change the numbers so that instead of being 138 for those who are 30%, to make it so that the 138 that are at 30% of average mean income, and have it be 68 that are for that. And then, and so you're going to have the majority of them be for those who have less. And instead of having us waste so much money on paying the middleman for that buffer between high rent, which is way too high here, even for at the rate you're saying, and then what people pay, simply just cap what that rent is, pay less, don't have the middleman take the money out, and then you'll have more savings for our tax dollars to provide more housing that at affordable prices. And this is not affordable. It's too high for so many people. The 30% for one person is more than twice my gross before taxes annual household income. So in addition to that, make sure that the criteria for the housing better meets the other criteria that the city claims are its priorities on public health, on energy conservation, having better design for insulation and for appropriate healthy temperatures indoors and outdoors. In my Home Forward complex, we know of at least 2 people that died from heat, and we don't know how many more because who's checking on them. Also, make sure that you have vegetated roofs, walls, as much place as possible so that you're reversing the heat island that has now and that could be with the design that we see proposed. Instead, have green walls, green gardens, more trees, and do more to prevent gun violence and domestic violence through nature and better housing and a more affordable rent. And as far as 643, please require that the money that is spent on this have more returns for tax dollars for the city, and having left it on the middle, and then have that money savings go towards providing more housing for those who pay even lower rents. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And Megan, does that conclude public testimony on these items?
It does.
Very good. Unless there's any other business, Megan, please call the roll on 642 first, please.
Maps.
I'd like to start out by thanking Commissioner Ryan, the Housing Bureau, and Home Forward for taking on this important project. I love it. I think I'm really excited about the supportive housing piece of this, the deeply affordable units, and the family-sized apartments. Really great work, everybody. And it's my honor to vote yes on this.
Rubio.
I want to thank Commissioner Ryan, the Housing Bureau, Home Forward for continuing to work on this project since 2017. And I also want to thank the community partners in Southeast that have helped shape this project for years. I'm also happy to see all the combination of partners on this project to ensure that supportive housing residents and really all residents receive the support that they need to be successful. This is an exciting step today, and I hope I'm able to attend the groundbreaking. And I also look forward to seeing this project continue to take shape. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Director Callahan and Michael Bonacore. So good, Bonacore. So good to see you here. Thank you for all your work of late. You've been under a lot of pressure, and you've been a lot of our thoughts as you continue to lead. I also am really excited about the partnerships. I've learned a lot about how much leveraging it takes to pull these projects off. And the Housing Bureau really does partner with so many to make this work. It's not as simple as it looks when you pass a bond levy. And so I just wanted to say, seeing who the operator with El Hispano Catholico already engaged on the ground floor, that's a great testament to the work that goes in to building the community to make a better community. So I'm excited about this project. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Very happy to vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, call the roll, please, Megan, on 643.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Speaking of leveraging, there we go. This item, I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Megan, that completes our business for this morning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, colleagues, we are adjourned until 2 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Recording stopped.